The Chicago skyline shimmered in the darkness like 1,000 scattered diamonds, each light a testament to power, ambition, and survival. But high above the streets, inside the glass and steel monument to one man's dominance, the air was thick, with a very different energy. Panic. Titan Technologies' top floor, usually a quiet sanctuary of confidence and calculated order, now throbbed with the shrill wail of alarms. Rows of monitors bled red warning messages, flashing in rhythmic bursts that painted every face in shades of danger. Richard Coleman stood at the center of it all, framed by the towering windows of his corner office, his reflection fractured by the glass. At 62, he carried himself with the rigid poise of a man accustomed to bending the world to his will. A perfectly tailored navy suit clung to his tall frame, his silver hair meticulously groomed until now a fine sheen of sweat beaded along his forehead, breaking the image of unshakable control. On the massive screen before him, numbers plunged in freefall, line after line of financial data unraveling in real time. The figure at the top blinked from $900 million to zero in seconds, as if the wealth had simply been swallowed whole by the night. Sir Marcus, his chief of security, stepped forward, his voice tight, almost strangled. They breached every firewall. It's the most sophisticated intrusion I've ever seen. Our backup systems are. He hesitated, his eyes flicking to another monitor as more data bled away. They're failing, all of them. Richard's jaw tightened. For decades, Titan Technologies had been his kingdom, forged out of grit, risk, and an uncompromising will to win. He had built an empire that dominated markets, crushed competitors, and insulated him from the vulnerabilities ordinary men faced. But as he stared at the blinking warnings, he realized he was looking at something he couldn't command, something he couldn't simply buy away. Shut it down, he said finally, the words coming out low and sharp. Marcus blinked. Sir, if we do that, if we do nothing, we lose everything. Richard's voice cracked like a whip, the fury in it masking the sudden weight in his chest. Shut it down. A flurry of keystrokes followed, but the alarms didn't stop. In the hallway, frantic voices echoed, executives barking orders, assistants shuffling papers that no longer mattered, the distinct sound of desperation creeping into every exchange. Richard stepped out of his office, moving swiftly through the chaos, a storm contained in human form. He passed clusters of pale-faced managers, each whispering figures and forecasts like last rites, and then, as he strode toward the elevator, bank, it happened. Something small, almost insignificant, but it made him pause. A janitor's cart pushed slowly down the hall, the scent of industrial cleaner faint in the air. Behind it, a woman in a faded uniform kept her eyes down, avoiding the stampede of panic. But perched on the edge of the cart was a little girl, no more than 7, her small hands curled around the metal handle. Her legs swung idly, her sneakers scuffed, but her gaze was fixed directly on him. Wide brown eyes, steady and unafraid, met his with a kind of quiet curiosity. She didn't flinch when the alarms blared or when Richard's sharp, commanding stride slowed as he passed. For a fraction of a second, the billionaire felt something unusual and almost imperceptible jolt, as if this child saw something in him no one else did. Then the moment passed. He turned away, his mind snapping back to firewalls, ransom demands, and collapsing stock prices. The doors closed on the elevator with a hiss, sealing him back inside the war room of his empire. But somewhere in the back of his mind, the image of those steady brown eyes lingered like an uninvited thought, an anomaly in a night otherwise defined by destruction. The hum of servers in the lower levels of the building was the only sound that felt steady that night. Upstairs, Titan's executive floors throbbed with tension. But down here, the lights buzzed dimly over empty hallways that smelled faintly of bleach and dust. Margaret Mitchell pushed her cleaning cart with slow, measured movements, careful to avoid the rushing footsteps of employees darting between offices. She had learned, over 3 years of working nights at Titan, how to become invisible in moments like this. Invisibility meant safety. It meant keeping the job that, though meager, kept a roof over her and her daughter's heads. Emma sat curled on the cart, legs dangling over the side, a small backpack resting against her knees, her head turned toward the faint glow spilling from open office doors. She didn't fidget, didn't talk, just watched. For a child of 7, her eyes seemed far older, tracking patterns, following movements. They paused each time she caught sight of a computer screen, her gaze narrowing like she was reading something unspoken. "Why is everyone running? Mommy," she whispered at last, leaning toward her mother. Margaret glanced down, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart. Remember what I said, quiet while you're here." "Okay," Emma nodded, but her gaze drifted past her mother's shoulder. Through the glass wall of a small conference room, a monitor flickered, with streams of code, flashing red with intermittent warnings. To anyone else, it was chaos. To Emma, it was like looking at a messy but solvable puzzle. Shapes in the data connected in ways her mind instinctively mapped, like fitting mismatched pieces into a pattern that made sense only to her. Margaret moved her cart toward the break room, her movements a little slower than before. Each step sent a dull ache pulsing through her chest, the reminder of what she tried to hide from everyone: stage 3 breast cancer. Moving faster than the doctors predicted, her prescribed medication was barely touching the pain anymore. But the experimental treatment they said offered a real chance might as well have been sitting on the moon, for how far out of reach it was. $475,000. She couldn't earn that in 10 years, much less before the disease decided it was done with her. Emma slid off the cart and dug through her backpack, pulling out a banana, its peel bruised from the trip. "You forgot your breakfast again," she said softly, holding it up. Margaret shook her head. "You eat it." "I'm not hungry." Emma didn't move. Her small face was serious now, her eyes searching her mother's. "You need to eat to take your medicine," the doctor said. For a moment, Margaret wanted to argue, to insist she was fine, but she saw the truth in her daughter's gaze. Emma knew she might not understand the details, but she knew her mother was sick. Somewhere above them, a fresh alarm blared, followed by the sound of voices raised in panic. A man's barked orders echoed through the stairwell, hard and commanding. Margaret knew that voice from hushed conversations in the hallways. The billionaire himself, Richard Coleman. She had never spoken to him, never even been in the same room, except for that brief flicker of eye contact earlier that evening when he passed. She doubted he remembered it at all. Emma, however, seemed transfixed by the memory of that moment, by the way he looked at her just before disappearing into the elevator. She didn't know why, but something told her that the man upstairs, the one fighting to save his company, was somehow tangled up in what she had just seen on that monitor. And Emma Mitchell had a role she'd never told anyone. If she saw the pieces to a puzzle, she couldn't let it go unsolved, even if it meant walking into a world that was never meant for her. Tonight, the puzzle was bigger than anything she'd ever seen, and somewhere, deep down, she already knew it was going to pull her right into the center of the storm. The third day after the attack dawned gray and heavy over Chicago, the kind of morning that made the whole city feel weighed down. But inside the upper floors of the Coleman Tower, the air was beyond heavy, it was suffocating. Titan Technologies had the look of a ship taking on water faster than the crew could bail. Executives moved like ghosts through the hallways, clutching reports that meant nothing if the systems stayed locked. Desks that usually buzzed with quiet confidence now sat littered with empty coffee cups and crumpled post-it notes scrawled with last-minute ideas that had already failed. In his office, Richard Coleman sat hunched over a screen. His broad shoulders curved inward as if the weight of 30 years of work was pressing down all at once. His suit, once a uniform of power, was rumpled, the collar of his shirt open. The sharpness in his eyes had dulled, but not completely. There was still fight there, though it flickered like a candle about to gutter. The number on the financial report in front of him was a death sentence. A 78% drop in Titan's stock value overnight. Investors were in open revolt. The board had given him 48 hours to present a viable recovery plan before they would vote on liquidation. Marcus, his head of security, stood nearby, delivering more bad news. The FBI cyber division says the malware is one of a kind. Whoever did this didn't just want to steal from you, they wanted to obliterate everything. There's a dead man switch buried in the code. If we can't break it in time, all encrypted data will be permanently destroyed. Richard's reply was little more than a growl. Then break it. But even as he said it, he knew they were outmatched. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the idea that someone, maybe someone he'd underestimated or crossed, had outplayed him entirely. Down on the employee floor, Margaret was wiping down a table in the break room, the ache in her chest gnawing at her. She felt dizzy, her vision narrowing for a moment until Emma's voice pulled her back. "Mommy, you need to sit." "I'm fine, baby." "No, you're not." Emma pressed a cool hand to her mother's forehead, frowning. "You need that special medicine. You can't wait." Margaret opened her mouth to reassure her, but Emma wasn't listening anymore. Her gaze had drifted to the TV mounted in the corner, which was tuned to a financial news channel. There was a live shot of Richard Coleman entering the building, surrounded by stone-faced security. The Chiron screamed in bold red letters, "Titan Technologies on the brink." Emma's eyes darkened in thought. She had been turning over the code she'd seen in her mind for the past 2 days, the patterns replaying over and over until she could see the shape of them without even trying. And now, with the news reminding her of who this man was, the man whose company was crumbling, she felt the puzzle calling her name. She slipped off her chair. "Where are you going?" Margaret asked. "Just to the bathroom," Emma lied, but her small feet were already padding toward the executive hallway. She knew the layout from the night she'd followed her mom to clean the top floors. She knew exactly where Richard Coleman's office was. Outside that office now, Jennifer, Richard's assistant, was fielding calls and deflecting reporters with the practiced sharpness of someone used to high-pressure days. She was too busy to notice a small figure slip into the doorway until a determined little voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Coleman," Emma said, clear and certain. "I know how to fix your computers." Richard looked up from the table where he'd been reviewing another hopeless report. For a moment, he just stared. He recognized her, the girl from the hallway 3 nights ago, the one with the steady eyes. Margaret appeared a second later, breathless and horrified. "Emma, I am so sorry, Mr. Coleman." "She doesn't understand." Richard raised a hand. "It's fine." He kept his gaze on the girl. "Come here." Emma walked forward without hesitation. "It's not random," she said. "The attack, it's a puzzle, and I can see how the pieces fit, but you have to promise me something before I show you." Richard arched a brow. "And what's that?" "You'll give my mom the special medicine for her cancer, the one the doctors say is too expensive." The room went still. Margaret's lips parted in shock, her face flushing with embarrassment and something else, fear. She had kept her illness from everyone at Titan. To have it spoken aloud in front of the most powerful man in the building felt like a violation. Richard leaned back, studying them both. Catherine's face's late white flashed unbidden in his mind, pale and gaunt in her last days. She died despite the best care money could buy. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. Margaret nodded once. "Stage 3. The insurance doesn't cover the treatment. That might help. But this is not how I wanted you to find out." He didn't answer right away. Something had shifted in him, though he couldn't name it. Finally, he gestured to the chair opposite him. "Show me what you see." And as Emma climbed up onto the seat, her small hands already reaching for his laptop. "Richard Coleman, Billionaire," empire builder, and master of control felt. For the first time in years, the faint spark of a thing he thought he'd buried forever died hope. The air inside Titan's Crisis Command Center was electric, but not with confidence. It was the taut, crackling energy of people balancing on the edge of collapse. Rows of engineers hunched over glowing screens, their faces pale in the sterile light. Coffee cups littered desks. Every keystroke sounded like it might be the one to save or bury the company. Into that room, far too small for the weight it now carried, walked a little girl in jeans and sneakers, her hair tied back with a faded blue ribbon. She carried number laptop, no badge, no credentials. Yet every head turned when she entered at Richard Coleman's side. A few eyebrows rose in disbelief. Some even smirked until Richard's voice cut through the whispers. This is Emma Mitchell. She's here to help. The smirks faded. No one dared challenge him out loud. But Richard saw the skepticism in their eyes. He ignored it. His instincts honed over decades of reading people told him this child was not here for a field trip. Dr. Harrison, Patton's head of cybersecurity, stepped forward, still holding the tablet. Mr. Coleman, with all respect, no time for respect. Harrison, Richard snapped. Time is what we don't have. He gestured for Emma to sit at an unoccupied workstation. She climbed into the chair, her feet dangling above the floor, and pulled the keyboard close. The room was silent except for the hum of machines as her small fingers began to move fast. Precise, deliberate. Lines of code scrolled across her screen in dizzying succession. She paused occasionally, tapping her lip in thought, then typed again, stringing together commands most of the professionals in the room had never considered. Dr. Harrison leaned over, intending to guide her, but froze when he realized she wasn't. Guessing she was navigating. What are you looking for? He asked carefully. A signature. Emma murmured. Every person writes code a little differently, like handwriting. This one repeats certain loops in odd places, like, hiding a riddle inside a story. Richard's gaze sharpened. Can you find it? Emma didn't answer right away. She executed another sequence, then zoomed in on a cluster of corrupted files. There, she said finally, pointing. See those? They're not random. They're like a fingerprint. Harrison's eyes widened. She's right. And this style. He glanced at Richard. It's familiar. Who? The hesitation lasted only a second. Adrian Wells, former CTO. The name hit the room like a dropped weight. Richard felt the air shift around him. Wells, brilliant, volatile, and dangerous, had once been his protege until Richard caught him stealing proprietary algorithms. Firing him had been messy. Destroying his career had been deliberate. Richard's jaw tightened. You're telling me this attack was personal? It's worse, Harrison said grimly. The dead man switch buried in the code. It's his style. If it triggers, every encrypted file will be destroyed forever. And he set it to go off in. He glanced at the system clock. 4 to 7 hours. A murmur rippled through the room. Emma kept working, unfazed. Then we shouldn't waste time, she said. Richard hurriedly looked at her. Calm under pressure, decisive, unafraid of the complexity that made seasoned engineers hesitate. She reminded him of himself at that age, before money and power had dulled the pure thrill of solving the impossible. And yet, there was something more. She wasn't just chasing the challenge for its own sake. She was fighting for her mother's life. He could see it in the set of her jaw. Margaret stood near the doorway, her cleaning cart awkwardly parked beside her. She looked like she wasn't sure whether to be proud, afraid, or both. The executives had always looked through her, but now every person in that room, engineers, managers, even Richard Coleman, was watching her daughter as though she were the only hope left. Mr. Coleman, Harrison said quietly, if Wells is running this himself, he's not doing it from home. He needs serious hardware, secure, off-grid. We need to find him. Richard's voice was low, dangerous. Then, find him. Emma didn't look up from the keyboard. The countdown clock glowed on the main monitor like a predator's eyes in the dark. 4 to 7 hours. When Emma had first pointed it out, now it dwindled to just over 15. The numbers pulsed against the dimmed lights of Titan's command center. A silent reminder that every second slipping away brought the company closer to digital extinction. The room was different now. No more casual skepticism about the little girl at the keyboard. The engineers had stopped second-guessing her. They leaned in when she spoke, followed her instructions without question. Her diagrams covered the whiteboards, each arrow and circle drawn in a looping child's handwriting. But the logic within them was surgical. Richard stood a few steps behind her. watching her braid a plan out of chaos. In his world, strategies were forged in boardrooms backed by forecasts and legal teams. Here, a 7-year-old was directing the survival of a billion-dollar empire with the clarity of someone who saw not just the board, but the entire game in motion. Mr. Coleman, Dr. Harrison said, breaking into his thoughts, "We've got a location." An FBI agent approached, holding a tablet. "We've traced a secondary signal from the attack traffic. Some of it is bouncing through a facility in Evanston, your secondary data center." Richard's eyes narrowed. "That site's supposed to be locked tighter than the Pentagon." The agent's jaw tightened. "Apparently not. We believe Wells is physically inside your facility. That's why he's staying one step ahead. He's monitoring you in real time from within your own walls." Richard's temper flared, the sharp, cutting tone of the boardroom replacing the measured patience he'd been trying to hold. "Then why are we still talking? Get a team in there." As the FBI moved to coordinate the raid, Emma kept typing, her eyes narrowing. "He's watching the wrong part of the system," she murmured, almost to herself. Richard leaned down. "Explain." "If we make a fake recovery, make it look like we're working here," she tapped the main screen, "while we really fix it somewhere else, he'll waste time trying to break the fake one." Dr. Harrison's head snapped up. "Network segmentation. We could isolate a subnet, hide the real work entirely, within minutes." Emma's deception was in motion. The big wall displays now showed the recovery percentage stalling and dropping, a grim picture for any intruder watching. But in a lockdown, hidden network, the real recovery climbed steadily. It worked for almost an hour. Then the room went quiet when the countdown clock suddenly jumped. 15 hours became 7. "He's accelerating the switch," Harrison said, his voice tight. "He knows." Emma's hands flew across the keyboard. "We can still beat him. We just have to move faster." Richard glanced at the clock. The board's liquidation meeting was scheduled in 3 hours. If they didn't show enough progress by then, Titan would be gone before the attack even finished its work. Margaret appeared in the doorway, pale but upright. "How bad?" she asked. Richard didn't soften it. "We've got the battles to win, one with him and one with my board. If we lose either of them and cut him off," not looking up, "we're not going to lose." And in that moment, Richard believed her, not because of the numbers on the screen, but because of the sheer, unshakable certainty in her voice. What none of them knew yet was that the real enemy wasn't just Adrienne Wells. It was someone far more calculating. Someone who had been playing both Richard and Adrienne like pieces on the same board for over a year, and that truth was about to tear open a new, more dangerous chapter of this fight. The FBI raid on Titan's Evanston data center should have ended the chase. Agents moved in with tactical precision, sweeping the rows of humming server racks under strobing emergency lights. But when the radio crackled back to Titan's command center, the message wasn't victory, it was betrayal. "He's not here," the lead agent reported. "But we found something: tools, equipment, logs. He's been inside this place for weeks, maybe months. And he's routing everything through a mobile system. He could be anywhere." Richard's face hardened. He could feel the floor shifting. Under him, the plan unraveling. "So we're still blind." Emma didn't look up from her station. "Not completely," she said softly, her small voice somehow slicing through the room's tension. "I've been watching him watch us. He leaves little traces when he gets curious, like leaning over someone's shoulder in a library. His breath moves the pages, and he keeps leaning in the same places." Dr. Harrison frowned, following her train of thought. "You think you can pinpoint him from that?" Emma's fingers kept moving. "I think he's not the only one in this game." Richard's head snapped toward her. "Explain." The child looked up then, her expression disturbingly calm. "He's fighting us, but something else is fighting him. There are patterns in the code that don't match his fingerprint. Someone else has been here all along. They've been moving pieces so you and he would fight each other instead of looking at them. Before Richard could speak, a voice came from the back of the room. Stanley Weaver, head of building services, stood awkwardly in the doorway. Sir, I think I can confirm that. All eyes turned to him. He swallowed hard. 18 months ago, a man came to me, said he was with corporate security, paid me cash to install special monitoring software on both your and Wells's workstations. I didn't ask questions. Should have. That man wasn't from Titan, he was Victor Jang. The name dropped like a bomb. Richard felt a flash of heat crawl up his spine. Quantum dynamics, he said under his breath. Titan's fiercest competitor. Ruthless, patient, and now, evidently, the puppeteer pulling both strings. Dr. Harrison's voice was grim. That means this attack wasn't just Wells's revenge. It was Jang using him as a weapon to gut Titan from the inside. The implications hit like cold water. If they stopped Wells, Jang would still have the means to bury them, and if the dead man switch went off, Jang wouldn't just cripple Titan, he'd wipe out the only evidence of his sabotage. Emma swiveled in her chair to face Richard fully. Then we have to make him stop, and he's not going to listen to you. Richard understood instantly. You want me to put you through to Wells? Yes, she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Margaret stepped forward, alarm flaring in her voice. Emma, but her daughter's eyes didn't waver. He needs to hear from someone who isn't playing his game, and someone who doesn't want to win by destroying him. Richard waited, his mind flashing back to every brutal deal, every career he'd crushed without looking back. This was madness, and yet, in the situation they were in, madness might be their only shot. Minutes later, Adrian Wells's face appeared on the main screen, drawn, unshaven, eyes bright with something between triumph and exhaustion. Coleman, he sneered. Come to beg. The billionaire stepped aside. Not me, he said, and Emma leaned into frame. Hi, I'm the one who's been taking your code apart. Adrian blinked, startled out of his composure. What are you, 8, 7.5, she corrected, and I'm not your enemy. But if you keep this going, someone else wins and it won't be you. Wells frowned. What are you talking about? She told him about the patterns that weren't his, about Jang's planted software, about the months of manipulation. She told him with the precision of an engineer and the blunt honesty of a child, until something in his face shifted. The hatred didn't vanish, but it was joined by something else. Calculation, even if you're right. He said slowly, I can't stop the switch. It's running on its own now. Then we change where it goes, Emma said, her voice steady, like turning a river before it floods a town. You know the clock was merciless, 8 minutes. That was all the time left before the dead man switch obliterated every encrypted file. Inside Titan's network, the command center had transformed into something more like a war room. Phones rang off. The hook, agents barked upgrades, and the hum of dozens of processors filled the air with a low, vibrating tension. On the main screen, the countdown ticked away in blood-red numbers while a smaller display tracked the recovery. %-50-4% in holding. To low to sway the board, to low to undo the damage, to low to matter unless they could stop the cascade entirely. Emma sat forward in her chair, so small compared to the oversized workstation, her eyes locked on the streaming code. Beside her, Adrian Wells passed in live from an FBI-secured duplink moved in perfect rhythm with her commands. The rivalry, the venom, all of it had been pushed aside for one singular goal, survival. Redirect the tertiary flow to the sandbox. Environment, Adrian instructed. Already done, Emma replied without looking up. But he's countering faster now, look. A fresh wave of hostile code poured across her screen like black water breaching a dam. It was brutal, designed to multiply its destruction with each passing second. Dr. Harrison stepped up behind them, scanning the live data. He's splitting the payload, bypassing your containment. Emma's jaw tightened. Then we split. A2 scatter it into as many virtual environments as we can spin up. Make it chase ghosts instead of the real systems. Richard leaned forward. Do it. Whatever you need. Within moments, unused servers were coming online like emergency. Escape pods. The engineers followed Emma's rapid-fire instructions, their earlier skepticism gone. She had earned their trust, and now they moved with the urgency of soldiers following a commander into battle. 6 minutes. In the corner, Margaret stood frozen, her hands gripping the edge of a chair. She could see the exhaustion in Emma's posture, the slump of her small shoulders, the faint quiver in her hands, but her daughter's voice stayed steady, unwavering. Margaret thought of all the nights she'd carried Emma home from the bus stop after cleaning shifts, her child asleep in her arms, and wondered how on earth she had raised someone this fearless. 5 minutes, the FBI team in Chicago broke through. On the comms, Coleman, we've got Jang's mobile command center in sight. Moving in now. Richard's head snapped toward the agent's voice. Arrest him. But keep that hardware running. We need every byte of data as proof. For minutes, Emma's monitor flared with new alerts. He's trying to collapse the decoys, she said, her tone tight but calm. If he gets through, the real system's next. Adrian swore under his breath, then leaned closer to his own screen. Run a recursive loop online for 127, my variant. Not yours is riskier, but faster. Emma adjusted, fingers dancing. Across the keyboard in a blur. Done. Now shunt the payload into Sector 9 and her words cut off as the main display flickered. The countdown jumped for minutes became one. Gasps rippled through the room. Richard's chest tightened. Is that? He's forcing a manual trigger. Adrian snapped. No time left. Emma's eyes narrowed. Then we make him think. It worked. She yanked a flash drive from the workstation and slid it into the port, pulling up a final pre-built sequence. On every visible monitor in the room, data streams began to collapse. Fake data, designed to mimic the real destruction. To anyone watching remotely, Titan's core was crumbling. 30 seconds. The real system buried under layer after layer of hidden architecture remained untouched. Its recovery percentage climbing by the second. 20 seconds. On the secure Ooplink, Adrian smirked faintly. You're good, kid. Don't call me kid, Emma said, still typing. 10 seconds. The hostile code slammed into the final containment, detonating harmlessly in the decoy environment. Screens everywhere flashed with simulated failure messages. In reality, the attack had been absorbed and locked away. 0. Silence. The alarm stopped. On the hidden monitor, recovery was already at 63%. Stable. Safe. The room erupted cheers. Relief. Disbelief. Margaret rushed forward, pulling Emma into her arms. You did it, she whispered, her voice breaking. Emma shook her head against her mother's shoulder. We did it. All of us. Richard turned toward the main screen as an FBI agent appeared on the feed. We have Jang in custody. His systems are intact. We've got everything. For the first time in days. Richard let out a breath that wasn't edged in dread. His eyes found Emma, still tucked into her mother's embrace. In those eyes, he saw the kind of loyalty, courage, and clarity that all the millions in his accounts had never been able to buy. The board reconvened later that day, and there was no vote to liquidate. Instead, they voted unanimously to keep Richard as CEO, but when he stood to address them, he didn't speak of market share or quarterly projections. He spoke of a little girl who had saved them when no one else could, and of a new kind of titan, one that would put people before profits. Outside the boardroom,